You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight on episode 114, we will be taking a look back at the Philadelphia homestand, where we have a lot of interesting things that we need to talk about, a lot of stories coming out of that weekend, despite what some of the results may say in the score line, a lot of them being 3-0s this past weekend, but more on that later. So before we get into the news and introduce you to my co-hosts, let me just quickly take a moment to thank everyone who is joining us tonight for our live show on Twitch. And of course, I have to thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So joining me tonight, as always, are both of my co-hosts. It's been an interesting couple of weeks. We still are waiting to see all the teams, guys. Obviously, we got some updates in regards to scheduling, which is an update, but not like a full update. So more on that in just a minute here. But, looking back at this past weekend, how'd you guys feel about just the overall quality of the games that we saw? And Burger, I'm going to throw it to you because, it was definitely a rougher week in your situation for more than one reason.
Yeah, Houston did not turn out that well. And on top of that, I literally just got over being sick. So it was a pretty rough weekend, but it was good to have plenty of Overwatch to be watching while I was just laying on the couch drinking as much water as I could, trying to get better. So it, hopefully next weekend's better, but looking at the schedule, it looks halfway really scary for Houston. So we'll talk about more of that later, but the general tone of my weekend was sadness that the Outlaws not just lost. Like if they would have lost putting up a fight, just the way they looked, it was rough. But how was your weekend, Danura?
My weekend was really well. So it was my stepdad's birthday. So we had a whole bunch of his family members fly over. And so I got to hang out with him and his family, which is just now my family. So it was a really good time. Other than that, I did lose my job, but it was for stupid reasons. So I'm not really mad about that. And I've already found another one. So it's been pretty good. It's good times. I'm ready to get past Atlantic Overwatch League, and we have a few more weeks of that. But other than that, it's been a pretty good weekend.
Yeah, and I have to say it's definitely been a weird week. Because the majority of the people I talk to within the community, whether they're podcasters or not, are Texas Overwatch League fans. And it hasn't been good on either side, guys. But, my 0-4 Texas Watch prediction actually came to fruition. Unfortunately for the Outlaws, in their case, not finding any map wins along the way to that 0-2 start. But, next week is a new week. They face Boston, so maybe? I don't know. We'll have to see where all of the cards are going to fall as they ante up in this case. But let's jump into the news for this week. So we got a couple of updates. I've actually got some new details in regards to the broadcast deal between YouTube and Activision Blizzard in regards to the streaming rights for the Overwatch League, Call of Duty League, as well as the Hearthstone esports. And the funny thing about this is, the Hearthstone stuff, they're like, you know what, you can just have it. There wasn't any money associated with that. That's probably also why it only drew, 4 6K people. Maybe, I don't know. But they also didn't really advertise it. But anyways, this was from the Esports Observer, and they cited that YouTube paid Activision Blizzard $160 million to stream the events for the next 3 years. So the larger chunk of that figure is for the Overwatch League. Call of Duty League, they don't really say like any percentages or anything like that, but that's a smaller portion of that. But, more money can definitely be coming in through this deal as long as they hit their targets. So should the league hit the targets for like the ad sales and viewership, then more money is going to be cycling into the league. And what it sounds like, a lot of the teams are very happy with the deal that we have in place. So like when we kind of compare the deals, it's nearly worth twice as much as what we saw in regards to the Twitch deal, which was $90 million, which was, struck 2 years ago between Twitch and Activision Blizzard at the time. But it's still really early on. Like they seem to be happy with what the viewership has been so far, even though we're still kind of in like low 60,000 range. I haven't really peaked. I didn't really see it peak like above like 70 or 72K over the weekend. So I don't know. Like I don't have the numbers on hand in that regard. But how are you guys feeling now that we know a little bit more about the deal? Like, do you feel like this is going to end up being, in the longer run, more money being brought in compared to what we were getting? Just kind of like knowing how much greater ad revenue has been when you compare the streaming platforms, as I kind of mentioned last week, when you compare like the billions to the millions between YouTube and Twitch, respectively.
Okay, so I think YouTube realizes that esports really is the next big thing, and they're trying to get in on it early. And Overwatch League is more of an established league, but Call of Duty as a game has been around a lot longer. So they got both of those, which are anticipated to be pretty big. Now, Hearthstone, I don't think that where they're being broadcasted has anything to do with the fact that their esports is failing. It's kind of been mismanaged, and their system just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. So seeing that they got quite a bit more money from YouTube than Twitch is actually excellent to get more, like going in, get more money into the league. One thing I did on Sunday, I experimented and watched all the games on the MLG site,
Okay.
and actually it was quite a bit like smoother. It didn't really have any times where it dropped below being in HD. Like it actually worked really well. And the reason I did that is because at one point they went from Watchpoint pre-show into what was supposed to be the start of the games, and it just black screened. And I checked out MLG and it was going, and then I kept checking back to YouTube, and it took a while before it came back. So I just kind of wanted to stick with that and see like what it was like, because I've just watched it on YouTube for the first couple weekends, and it actually was really good. I think overall, just YouTube seems to hit more people than Twitch, even if the numbers are slightly lower. I just think you're not having people doing the logging in for drops yet. I think if they find a way to do drops, you might see a spike again. So I'm curious if they're going to find a way to have drops. And the all access pass, they kind of said that they're looking into it, and that's all we heard. So I think that the YouTube deal just kind of needs a little bit more polish and finishing touches, and it'll be right there where we were last year. And I think they can do that.
Yeah, this is definitely not the end of the deal. I think this is just the beginning, and right now it does look a little sloppy on the broadcasting side. However you want to look at it. With that being said, I think I really like the VOD system it has, where it will literally upload the game a few minutes afterwards, because I didn't get to watch the first Outlaws game. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think I'm mad about not being able to watch it. But then I went over in the VODs and I got to like skim over it, see what happened, and then go through it again later on at high quality, and like not have to really worry about the broadcasting, the minutes that there was, the ads, as many ads as there was. As much as I love being a live viewer of the game to get the scores live, it's kind of nice having those VODs up so fast. I think that's what I liked about the YouTube deal. I think this YouTube deal is huge. I think there's going to be even more coming to it if Overwatch keeps going at a at least somewhat steady to raising pace. This could be huge. Also, Call of Duty League. I think it's going to grow Call of Duty League. I love watching the trash talk alone of the Call of Duty League stuff, and I never even would have looked at it before. But since I made my second account on YouTube, it's all Overwatch League stuff and Call of Duty League, and so I just go on there and I'll watch some content about it. It's great. I think I really enjoy it. I love watching it. I just got a recommendation for the Gladiators Vancouver game, but in Korean. So I went to the highlights of those and just watched the Korean casters react to it. It's just like it's little things. I guess it's not even like that big of a deal, but it's just like I'm loving the YouTube experience so far. I think YouTube knows what to do with the content itself, and if Overwatch League can raise its content to make it pleasing, it could really help both sides.
Absolutely. So we do have a couple of other bit of news that is affecting some of the other teams. We do have a new addition that was picked up for the Hanzhou Spark. As they've looked to add some additional firepower to that DPS line, so they went out and they signed Flexa DPS Otto, who had spent the 2019 season with the Washington Justice, and then prior to that, he was with the Shanghai Dragons during the inaugural season. As one of the few minor bright spots on that team when they went 0-40. Now that being said, looking back at this past season with the Justice, Otto did start basically 3/4 of the season. He was in every match during the first 3 stages of 2019 during the 3-3 meta, but unfortunately, once 2-2-2 surfaced within the Overwatch League, he only played in 1 match through that point. So the sign-in basically brings the Hanzhou Spark DPS rotation up to 4 players, 11 overall at this point. And that doesn't include Crystal, who was left off of the the roster reveal, all of that stuff. But obviously, we haven't really heard any updates on that front. But we're not expecting Crystal back. Now that being said, you're looking at a DPS lineup of Adora, Godsby, Bozzy, and Otto at this point. So, kind of looking back, this was a team that did fairly well in 3-3. Didn't really seem to have a ton of flexibility once we made the switch to 2-2-2. And a lot of that was just kind of pinned on the secondary DPS options that were on the Hanzhou Spark. Now, I know a lot of people like to go back and be like, oh, well, saying Otto was a bright spot on a winless team doesn't really say much, but he does have basically the highest team kill percentage in any match for a flooded deadlift that we've seen in the Overwatch League. That's kind of besides the point, but there's definitely been flashes of greatness and mechanical skill that we have seen from him over the first 2 seasons. So, Anura, do you feel like this is going to be that new secondary DPS where Otto can just come in and kind of take over that hit scan role that's kind of been lacking from this team here?
I think he'll find his way in this team. I think the DPS have a lot of holes on the Spark, and I think Addo can really fill those. I think for me, Addo's always been a player that I'd love to watch in the DPS role, but has never had the support around him. But now he's finally going to get that. I think he's going to pop off. With that being said, I think Spark, they looked pretty one-dimensional with their DPS. I felt like you knew exactly what Adora, Godsby, and Bozzy were going to do. But with Addo, I think it adds an extra flair that they didn't have before. At the end of the day, also, it's just a really, really good pickup for them. I think Addo's never a bad pickup. He can be a role player. He could maybe potentially be the star DPS for this team. It's a good pickup overall. I like it. I'm excited to see Spark play now.
Yeah, I think that where they're not going to have Crystal returning, clearly they need another DPS player to jump in there, because Adora and Bozzy, while they might have their place, they're not going to be able to carry all that weight. Godsby, I expect him to be their main DPS player throughout this season, but I mean, after some of the things we've seen this year, who knows? But I think that having Otto come in, it's a good pickup. They're just trying to fill in a couple little holes and up their flexibility for when roll queue comes in. uh, like they lost Crystal, and I think that we're going to see a very similar lineup of the Spark to what they were playing last year. I think that they went out this season and picked up some solid backups, and that most likely we're going to see similar. Um, I think you mentioned you thought Coldest might get a good amount of time, but I think that Otto is going to be one of the DPS that rotate around into the Spark,
Mhm.
and it's just a good pickup for them. They definitely needed just something a little more there. I don't know if Otto's the superstar that could like push them over the top, but they're trying and it's good. He has good potential.
Yeah, because there were a lot of people that were just like, well, this team really hasn't made any changes outside of, picking up a new support line, both being backup roles, essentially, depending on how you want to look at it. But support was never really, like, one of the biggest issues with that team. It was always just kind of plays on the DPS at that point. Either way, though, I'm looking forward to seeing him coming in and just being on a more complete team compared to what we have seen in the past. So we'll see how that is going to unlock his capabilities further throughout the rest of this season. And with that said, like the Spark are one of many teams that have been impacted by the China homestand event cancellations, and we do have an update from the league on that front. And basically, what's going to happen is the matches are going to be played over multiple days in week 6 and 7 at a studio in Seoul, South Korea. Now, they did say like they are going to make up a few matches in regards to the Dynasty homestand event, and that's the one that takes place during week number 5. Now, I do want to note on that end, you already have the Dynasty and the Hunters playing twice that week. And then you have the Spark and the Charge who only have one game that week. So I don't know if that means that we'll get Spark versus the Charge in that case, in that slot, just based off of, you know, how everything else is lined up, or if they're going to tack on more than 2 matches. I think that would be a lot to ask for the other teams. But either way, these matches are not going to affect the other scheduled homestands between weeks 5 through 7. So, unfortunately, at this point, we do not have any specific match dates and times. But basically, all the matches will still be live streamed on the Overwatch League YouTube channel, so we don't have to worry about missing out, even if, this is something that is online only, or however they're going to end up doing it on that front. So, Booger, like, from a fantasy perspective, like, this doesn't really help us a ton until we have the full info, but at least it gives us something to think about where we know that we can get some of those players in a little bit more consistently now, rather than having to say wait in 6 to 8 weeks in some cases, like it would be otherwise.
Yeah, it's kind of rough for fantasy, but at the same time, that's not their goal was to try to keep people safe. So I think this is one of those things where Blizzard's like handling it well. They are telling us pretty much what they know. I mean, I think that's why this is so vague, is because they really aren't sure. And they did the right thing. They called it off and said, "We'll let you know." And now they're letting us know like a little bit. And that's better than having no info and then just waiting until like Monday of week 5 and be like, "Oh yeah, Wednesday night there's going to be some games streamed." Because I kind of think that they might do some of them during the week when it says in a studio in South Korea. So that makes sense that they would just maybe even do it on like a Thursday or Friday, kind of like reminiscent to last year. And it's they kind of told us a little bit. I'll be really interested to see how they decide to structure it. Honestly, the way all the cancellations, along with the schedule being a little bit funky, has been like a straight nightmare for playing like standard fantasy. So that's why I kind of have been leaning in towards like the daily is like if you mess up, you got the next day to go, and that's a pretty cool way to do it. So I'm really curious when they're going to give us updates of who's playing when, because then we can start more wild speculation there. But it's kind of good that they're doing it over in Seoul, and because that's kind of one of the things we predicted, because they have good infrastructure for esports.
And a lot of
So-
them are already in Korea.
Yeah, that's like, this is literally one of the things that we said, oh, they might do this if they can. So it's good. I think overall Blizzard's handling that situation really well, which is good to say.
Yeah, there's nothing. Yeah, you kind of just hit it all. I'm just excited to see Gladiators play again. All these Chinese teams to play again. I'm ready to see them after a week of whatever we just saw last week. But with that being said, it's just it's good. We have a plan. It's in set. We're set. At least we have a plan, because before we were thinking about, oh, maybe it's online games. Maybe we wouldn't be able to see them. Maybe it'll be like we'll extend weeks or something later on. But this is nice. I think it's going to be stressful on some of these teams, if not most of these teams. But it's better than making them play in a dangerous environment. So at the end of the day, I'm excited to see what happens, for sure. It's exciting, and I get to see more Gladiators later on. That just makes me happy.
Yeah, I think really the big thing, I'm trying to pull up the games per week while I talk, is just the fact that there was like 1 week in particular that had like 16 teams that were going to be on bye until we got the updates. And that's basically cleared up at this point. So, just looking at that, that would have been week 7. So prior to the update, the only teams that would have been playing were Atlanta, Florida, Philadelphia, and Washington. That would have been pretty rough, but regardless, like, week 5 is actually pretty packed. There's only 3 teams that are on bye. Week 6, which is another one of the makeup weeks, there were currently 9 teams on bye as well. So just looking at it, in regards to the Pacific, you had Chengdu, Guangzhou, Hangzhou, all not playing any games. Same with Shanghai, who were one of the teams that basically didn't have anything planned until like week 10, until this update that we got. So at least we're not having to wait, 2.5 months to see this new look Shanghai Dragons that a lot of people are pretty amped up to see, and for good reason, with some of the new additions on that front. But it's still going to be a couple more weeks so we get to see some of these teams. I know we're all looking forward to just getting to see all 20 teams entering the season, and we got to wait just a little bit longer on that front. But week 2 brought a lot of discussion points. Honestly, there was some interesting decisions, whether it was just the approach of the game when it comes to team compositions. Some people wondering where certain players were on certain teams, whether it was on the Outlaws, more so the Philadelphia Fusion, perhaps, compared to other teams. And it just wasn't kind of like on one front with Philly either, which is definitely something that we're going to talk about here in a minute. But let's take a look at what we have in regards to our fact or fiction questions for the week. So again, like each week, we're going to be bringing a question to the table. So now I'm going to throw it over to you first. What was like one of the takeaways that you saw that we need to kind of like sort through in regards to week 2 here?
So week 2, we saw a lack of Fury on the Philadelphia Fusion, who we thought was gonna play, and Fate on the Florida Mayhem, who they traded for last year, and was known as one of the best main tanks in season 1. So my fact or fiction is Fury and Fate are 2 of the biggest trade bait this season. As in, they are most likely to be asked to be traded and like wanted to be traded from these teams in order to get something out. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing for me and Fury, I'm still trying to decide whether or not playing Fury was meant to be a flex on Philly's opponents, or if it's some other reason, because I don't buy into the fact that this is a flexibility issue between Fury and Poco, knowing that in the past, even going back to Stage 4, Fury did play Orisa in Double Barrier, when he was on the London Spitfire. So I know there's been a lot of discussion on our Discord about both Fury and Poco. I feel like a lot of people are still in the glow of Poco bombs from the inaugural season, and it kind of exaggerates their perception of how good he is as a player. But I don't think any one of us would shy away from putting Fury as top 3 in regards to off tanks across the board in the Overwatch League. I don't know where we would rate Poco, but it probably wouldn't even be top 5 in most situations. So, like, not seeing Fury was definitely a blow. In regards to Fate, though, I honestly wasn't that surprised. Like, I've seen plenty of Karians, Reinhardt out of Contenders Korea. He's always been very reactive in regards to his usage of the Fire Strikes and the Earth Shatter. So in this current meta, like, that wasn't really a huge blow or like eyebrow raiser in my case. But I feel like Philly definitely is going to have a plan for Fury. It's just a matter of when are they actually going to implement it. And for Fate, like, I feel like Fate would be the bigger trade bait in this situation. So Fury, I think, is going to stay put. Fate might be able to find a new spot, but, you know, to be honest, I don't think either player's gonna be moving anywhere. So, you know, it might be like a dangling a carrot on the stick, but I don't think these teams are gonna be willing to let either player go in this case.
I think Fury is probably going to play for Philly at some point. Maybe they were just flexing, or maybe he just wasn't feeling 100 and they figured, oh, why risk it? Just let Poco play. I think Fate is really good trade bait because Karian really looked great. So there's also the fact we have been seeing quite a few teams doing the double main tank, so there could be some advantage there to having 2 main tanks for some teams if that becomes more prevalent, even though it seems like it's not the best strategy right now. So it seems like the Diva is better than the Orisa when it comes to the second tank. So I would not be surprised to see Fate traded out, but what teams have we really seen that's like a really strong weakness in main tank, with the exception of maybe Houston? Like, I haven't really seen any teams where I'm just like, man, Fate's the missing piece to like make their team great. So I think that while Fate is the most likely to be traded of those two, he's probably going to see Florida through for most of the season, if not all of it.
Yeah, and you know, like, the whole main tank discussion with Houston, I will say this: I despise the fact that the commentary 99% of the time is like, but Muma's the best Western tank in the league or in the world, and it's just like, well, you're getting shat on by all these Korean tanks. Like, stop bringing it up. Like, he just looked really outclassed, and they just kept trying to like bring up the hype around him, only for Houston to just kind of be stuck in neutral. And you know, their team composition didn't help with that, but their approach to the way that they were actually using that team comp also detracted from the actual game plan that they should have had. So I don't know. It's just it's one of those things. But I think there's going to be bigger trade bait out there this season that we could see surface in this case.
Maybe even EQO if he don't get some time. So he could be pretty valuable to some other teams if he spends too much time on the bench for real. They almost didn't pick him back up either, so that seems like a pretty good trade bait out of teams that we've seen play.
I don't know if people would be looking at EQO for May specifically, though. That remains to be seen.
My fact or fiction right here. New York XL, they are only practicing for Philly this weekend.
Their second game is against Houston?
Yep. do they even practice to play Houston, or do they just focus on Philly? Because Philly looked hot this past weekend, and Houston looked the opposite of that. So
I'm gonna say fiction on this. There's something to be said about wanting to showcase how much of a mistake it is to leave a team. I really feel like New York is gonna want to put their foot down
oh,
on Meko's throat. In this case,
Teabag Central.
that's just my opinion. Like I like there's definitely an animosity that can be brought to the table on that regard, because we see the same sort of thing whenever, Fisher is going up against his prior 3 Overwatch League teams. Granted, we haven't seen the Dynasty match as of yet. But I don't think New York is a team that is just gonna be like, you know what, we're just gonna, let off the gas pedal in this case, knowing that there's a little bit of bragging rights on the line here.
I don't think they're gonna spend much time on Houston, to be honest. I think they're gonna be mostly focusing on Philly. But with the Houston games that came out, I don't think you can expect Houston to both play like they did last week, or perform in a higher skill level as high as Philly would be. So I really think they're going to be focusing on Philly, trying to figure out what their weakness is, how to go past that, and worry about the Houston game, because I think it's their second game.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think that at the end of the day that they're going to be going hard on Philly, and then they have plenty of time to look at Houston, maybe look at the Boston Houston game, see if there's any weaknesses there, and move on from there. But like taking it one game at a time would probably be the best idea for NYXL at this point.
Absolutely. So, my fact of fiction actually revolves around the Houston Outlaws and some comments that were made after the series from one of their coaches. Now I'm gonna read the tweet, and then I will finish the fact or fiction question. And this is coming from Dream, who says, "Sorry to our fans for our performance this weekend. Our players and staff had bad condition. Many of us had the flu, but we still did not play at our best. We will work hard this week to have a better showing in DC." And of course, hashtag anti-up in this case. So comments like this strike a little bit of a nerve for me. I don't like when coaches come on social media and they use excuses, because like just coming out like outright and saying it like that just comes across to me as just a bad excuse for how a team performs. So looking at this, do you feel like Dream's comments about the Outlaws players having to deal with the flu just comes across as that in regards to how the team performed, not picking up a single map win here in week number 2 to open their season?
Okay, so that seems more like something you would hear from a player and not a coach. Coming from a coach, that's probably not the best look. Leading up to the weekend, I did hear rumblings that there were some pretty sick Outlaws. One thing that was not sick from the Outlaws was some of Muma's shatters. That was far from sick. um, I I don't know if this was coming out as like just seeing like an excuse, or if it's like actually was really affecting who was able to play. But either way, that's kind of not like a professional take from a coach. Like, one of the players said that. That's like a little more passable in my opinion. um I don't think it's the best look, but at the same time, if it's the truth, it's the truth. So I didn't really think too much of it, but there definitely seemed to be something wrong with the Outlaws, and it, a lot of people think they're just a bad team, and I don't I don't know the how much this really played into their plan. Like, having the flu doesn't make you continue to run Lucio Brig while it's failing, just straight up, and just keep doing it. Like that, the flu doesn't do that. The flu would like make you miss some cooldowns or like make a bad shatter or some shit like that. But like some of the decision making there from the beginning, especially in their first game, was just like what are you doing? You can't blame that on the flu. That's not just like having a little bit of bad mechanics because you're sick. Like, it's bad planning, bad strategy for real. So I think that they had the perfect storm of bad going on this weekend.
Yeah, I don't mind this. If it's true, if they were that sick, it makes sense for him to bring it up. But I do agree that they probably should have brought it up a little bit earlier than just like Dream coming out after their losses or their loss, talking about how like they have a few and it's like this isn't our top performance. Well, I mean, there's a lot of other problems just other than the performance was like the comps, the way you guys played. I think even the players are very questionable who you played where. So there's I would say it's a bad excuse because there's more things than just the flu that would make this loss happen. You know,
Mhm.
that's where the bad excuse comes from. But I mean, at the end of the day, they're probably actually sick. I'll give them that. They're probably actually sick. I just wish it was the positive sick and like they look great out there. But that's just not what it was. So I mean, like I think it was a bad excuse. I really do. I also think it was the truth, and I think that it sucks for them. For me, they're looking like a 0-7 Valiant, but Valiant actually showed some glimpses of hope. I'm hoping this team can at least next few games show some glimpses of hope and just move on from there. They have some space on their roster. They have things they can change later that they can really bring into them that maybe won't affect next time they have all the flu together. They can probably win a few maps with these new players. I don't know, something new. Uh, but who knows? All right. Well,
Yeah, I will say, regardless of like how the Outlaws did, just basing the team off of 1 week, and this was kind of like magnified more so with the Outlaws. I 100% stand by is a complete overreaction. I know a lot of people are like, well, where's Linkser? Like, why were they playing Blase and Hydration, who are effectively the same person, the same hero pool, the same player type? Like, that didn't really make too much sense. And then Linkser's like, oh no, I'm not sick. So it's just like, well, then what was the case? So hopefully we'll have some answers going into week number 3 for the Houston Outlaws. But with that being said, we do have to start. We have to start by talking about how the Outlaws came out and just kind of, they did some things, a lot of confusing things primarily. So as we mentioned, they were opting to run this Brigida Lucio composition. There was a lot of weird engages. So normally when you're running the Brigida and the Lucio, and this is something that Florida Mayhem actually ran fairly well. Well, more so Brig. In their season opener that kind of just like unlocked their McCree potential. That didn't really happen with Blase in this case, but normally you speed boost, you get aggressive. Houston didn't do that. They played very passively, which is not what you want to do with this composition. They were basically waiting for the fight to come to them rather than actually engage in. So it just kind of went against everything that composition is meant to be. They weren't brawling with it. So it just was like a very big eyebrow raiser. And, like the funny thing about it is every time they would cut to the desk, you had a lot of people also on Twitter, on social media, on Reddit. Everyone is just like, why are you still running this when it is clearly not working? Because they were playing Raucous for the flex support, and he wasn't making the switch over to Anna, who had basically been, the most prominent healer outside of Lucio in many situations here so far this season. And eventually they went that way. Things didn't really improve. It took so long to get to that point, though. It just felt like the Outlaws had just dug a hole too deep to really claw their way out from. And it didn't feel like they wanted to fight for it, knowing how passive that team was from the get-go. And on the fact that Muma was constantly getting bullied or not finding, prominent shatters throughout the series. He was losing the Rhine games in both series, and it was just a combination of things for the Outlaws across the board. And for both Texas teams, they're eyeing an 0-2 start. And when we were doing our rankings, we're like, well, there's a lot of improvements on both sides. Maybe they'll do better, but then we're also like, whoa, we don't have too much faith in their organizations. And honestly, like, this is kind of like what we didn't want to see happen. Like, this is not what we wanted to see from the get-go from these teams. And at least on the Fuel side, like, we saw the DPS potential of Doha and Decay, but for the Outlaws, it was just so reserved. It's just really hard to see the big picture, at least right now. But I don't want to say, like, oh, the Outlaws are done. Like, they're going to be bottom of the barrel, and they're just going to stay there. That's definitely an overreaction that I've seen from quite a few people at this point. So this current week is definitely going to be more of an eye test for how Houston is going to do, because they do have a fairly winnable match to start things off in week 3 on Saturday, at least. But that Brig Lucio comp, man, that was really brutal to watch.
Yeah, Houston didn't really have a whole lot of bright points this weekend. One thing that I kind of think is Muma has not been the most impressive on the Reinhardt. I've always been more impressed seeing him playing Winston or Wrecking Ball. Those seem to be like his two more higher impact heroes. And it just seems like they should have been trying something different. Like, I think I might be wrong, but almost 100% of the time they were playing May McCree. I think there might have been some like blase Doomfist stalls at the end, but if it's not 100%, it was like 99% of the time. And it's like, if it's not working, you got to be trying something different. Like Muma's Reinhardt, I don't know if he was one of the ones with the flu or what, but more than one time you watched him walk up, look at an Orisa shield, shatter it. Like that happened like twice. And I'm just like, dude, I don't even do that. And I'm pretty bad. Like, I don't know what was going on there, but I definitely would like to see a much more looser version of the Outlaws. Like the being so stuck and isolated onto the same picks, it just didn't seem like a good look. Like the Lucio Brig, we were talking about how that was not working. They shouldn't have been doing it. They were getting wrecked. But they got wrecked all weekend playing May and McCree, and they didn't think about changing that either. Like I want to see like a more flexible, more flowing version. Like we saw in earlier weeks, there were teams playing like the Genji Sombra with the Winston and the Diva, and it's like Dante's got a really good Sombra. Like if they can't find someone to play Genji, maybe a Sombra Doomfist dive or something different. Like just something different, because watching them get beat is bad, but watching them get beat in that fashion just seemed worse. Like even if they lose more games, like I can handle a lose but loss, but it seemed like that they were just so like stagnant and stationary in what they were doing. And I don't know if maybe they just thought there's no chance this won't work. We'll be fine, and didn't have a backup plan. But maybe you should have a backup plan. Like there's a reason that you should have a backup plan. I don't know. What did you think about the Outlaws this weekend, Anura?
For me, I really think there's a lot of problems with them. I don't think this is their meta at all. I think I've heard there's rumors of them doing really good in scrims in previous metas, but this one, I don't think it's really meant for them. I think their communication was off. I don't think the Koreans are very meshed in well with the Westerns yet. The play style that they had, the Lucio Brig, the never switching, never thinking about switching. I don't think they're made to adapt on the fly, which is something you probably need later on the season, especially the way with hero rules are going. You're not going to have a set play style all the time. Teams are going to come out with something completely different than what you're thinking. You have to learn to adapt on the fly. This team has a lot of growing to do and not a lot of time. I'm going to put the end all be all with the coaches. I mean, Harsha and Dream, were respected coaches. They also have God Hurek, who should like at least give them a win somehow. So I mean, like there's a lot of things that like this team on paper should at least like somewhat work. Um, I mean, I'm just, where's Dante? Where's Linkser? Like, why is Linkser not good in this meta? This is it should be a hit scan meta. Where is he? I feel like Dante could like put a big role. Is Blase that integral to keeping your team together that you have to put him in? There's so many questions to this team alone that I don't know what to do with this team. This team is in a weird like they've always felt like this. They're in the echo chamber of their own like little echo hit chamber where they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to switch. They don't know. They just like, this is the best thing we're gonna do. Lucio break. It's gonna work. I swear. I promise. We're gonna build that wall. Anything, it's just like things that I don't agree with this team a lot. This is the main reason why I started out as a Houston Outlaws fan. Season 1, stage 1, they looked great. Their comp, and then like I felt like they just kept running their head against a wall and just kept going and just kept going. And like, I really hope one day they just break it. I thought with Harsha they would, but right now I'm very confused about this team.
Yeah, the fact that all of these teams are basically abusing the fact that Blase wouldn't really swap off of McCree, and would just bring in Widow was basically all you need to know.
And his McCree wasn't that good.
It was okay. Like it was.
Yeah.
He had some
Okay.
decent shots, but like it was from like when we compare it to like what we had seen from the other teams, at least so far in the league, it was definitely towards the bottom.
Yeah. Compared to like the other, like compared to Dallas's McCree, Decay was popping off in their 2 losses, and that like gave a little bit of hope to Dallas fans. But Blase, I wouldn't say he looked like the weakest point this weekend, but it was pretty close. Like, and they even had a game where they played on Junkertown, which is like historically one of the better maps for Widow and one of the maps that Linkser has absolutely popped off on. I've racked my brain, like I cannot understand why they wouldn't try to take that Widow duel. And did they think that Saya player was just so much better? Because I mean, I don't think he's so much better. I think it could have been competitive. And there's also to bring up like maybe Washington and Florida are both really good teams. Like maybe that's not, never mind. They probably are good teams, but there's no excuse for the way that Houston looked against both of them. So yeah.
Well, go ahead.
I just want a meta where I can see Blase play the heroes he's been practicing. I feel like he's been flexing the whole time he's been in the Overwatch League. Just been flexing to whatever his team needs. I want to see him in a meta where he can flourish. Because right now, it just seems like he's that team leader that like people feel like they need on the team. It just hasn't been his meta every single time. Or like the team just isn't good around him. Something like that. I want to see him be in his spot where he's supposed to be, playing whatever projectile he wants instead of a McCree. Like it's just it's infuriating because I keep hearing Blase is great, Blase is good. We haven't really seen him on the things we want to see him on, and it's just the last time we saw it was the Boston Uprising Gladiators game where Boston upset. I'm pretty sure Boston only won 1 game the rest of the year since then. So hopefully we get to see Blase on the heroes he actually flourishes in instead of flexing. That's what I want from the Houston Outlaws now. I don't care about wins anymore. I just want to see Blase do well.
Yeah, basically, Hureg needs to be on the bench in order to bring the force of Hureg into the equation here. Doesn't work when he is the coach in this case. But speaking of Washington, there was a moment in that Justice Fusion game where I honestly felt like neither team wanted to win. And that was on Anubis, which was basically just a map of throws. And it just... There was a situation where there was a back cap that happened. Ark was, just skating his way to the point. And Philadelphia, for whatever reason, decided to go past the choke point and be hyper-aggressive with, a little bit of time left. And it got back cap. And then on the opposite end... something worse even happened. It was really just a map of throws. And it was just one of those moments where, I get how exciting the back cap can be. But when, like, both teams technically had a chance to seal the deal, then neither team really did, it just makes me shake my head and just facepalm. It's like, what? It was right there. It was within grasp, and then they just kind of both drop the ball in this situation. Now, that being said, like, Justice in that series against the Fusion didn't look like a bad team. Roar was starting in this case since Lolsish was having visa issues, so we got to see how he did. And honestly, like, I thought there were two main tanks that played this past weekend that are on that path of redemption. Roar is definitely in discussion on that. There's a very obvious second option there in Philadelphia's case. And obviously that's been blown out of proportion based off of how we did this past season. But I thought both of them actually looked pretty damn good. But in that series, man, it's just like, all right, someone's got to close it out. And then sure enough, it was the Fusion taking it. But it's just like, you would think with a team that has been to the brink so many times, the Fusion would just start to get their shit together to wrap things up a little bit quicker when the opportunity presents itself. But they didn't.
Yeah, there was some weird calls in that game. Like in the additional rounds, when they only had like a minute to attack and they took A, and then the other team decided to contest and fight right there at A after it was already taken. And it was like, what kind of call is that? Like, if they would have got some good picks there, it could have ended it, but they didn't.
Yeah.
And that's literally why they didn't win that map, is because they took that like big risk move and they didn't come through.
Yeah.
So
And they invested ults too.
yeah, and it was like they were literally ulting, and it was like they were in the door of their spawn right when they took A, and I'm like, man, that does not seem like a good call. That seems like some like gold shit going on right there for real. Like I didn't know what was happening, but then when you really think about it, it's like, yeah, but if they would have got a pick or two there, it would have really been huge and probably could have snowballed into the like end of the map. But it just, when it doesn't work, it looks really bad.
Yeah, if they would have stayed on point. I think you're talking about the Washington. Yeah.
Washington.
So what happened was Stratus, he got in the ice block, he was on point, and then he gets out and he goes backwards instead of forwards off of the point, and they cap the point. And it was really sad, and the Stratus dies, and you can see everyone was about to jump on as well. It was the actual C9 from Washington. So there's two C9s that game, which was insane. For me, that game, it was very sloppy by both teams, and I was really down on Fusion after watching that. Because in my mind, I feel like Fusion, with the roster that they've built, should have been able to dismantle Washington at pretty heftily, but it was really close. It was really close. It could have been a game 5, Fusion style, Fusion's home court, but it was a sloppy game for me. But at the end of the day, I still think that Sato impressed me a lot, and I think when most people would hear these things being said about him throughout the whole offseason, they'd probably break down. I think he worked his tail off and really just became the main tank that he wanted to be at the end of the day, because I think he improved tenfold from what we've seen of him on Reinhardt alone. He was ready, he was hungry. I think that the game shouldn't have been as close as it was, but at least Fusion didn't make it a map 5. They really they pulled it off. They made it a 3-1. It wasn't, and they looked better. They looked better, and especially in the next game. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, and it's crazy to see just how Sato performed this past week. They took basically what was one of the most troubling things about them in 2019 and complete flipped the script 180. Philly had basically the best offensive efficiency with the least damage taken and deaths compared to the rest of the field. And, it's not what you would have expected. And, their team fight win rates have also been pretty good. They're actually top 3 so far out of the teams that we have seen play in the Overwatch League. And like they're only behind New York and a surprising team, despite what the record says. And Paris Eternal is actually in second for team fight win rates, which is absolutely weird to say. You even have Mayhem in the top 5, 0.7% behind Vancouver Titans. So that's definitely interesting. But I it's still early on. The Fusion had some other interesting things, obviously, like EQO was benched, Fury didn't see any play time. They were running a lot of double barrier, even though they do have, to varying degrees, capable D.Va players on that lineup. But, like, I had to say, like, Ivy looked pretty impressive on the main. I was, like, part of me was like, okay, like, I kind of want to see EQO to see if he could redeem himself as well, just knowing some of the other story arcs that are currently going on. But, Ivy just came in and slotted in pretty damn well on this team. And it just kind of like breathed new life into that mate utilization on this team that definitely lacked in like stage 4 of this past season. But regardless, there were a lot of new faces coming into the league that impressed. We got to see the new looking Florida Mayhem roster, pink and blue and all, with the new Runaway editions. And Yaki and Gangnam Jin both impressed early on. And, like, Karayan's Reinhardt actually proved to be pretty vital. Fell a little bit short in the second day, unfortunately. But they were basically just outmatched in this case. But, we've seen, a lot of these restructured rosters really starting to flex a bit more. And, the Reinhardt games have been very important to just, set in the tempo of these fights when it comes to the engages. And, I don't know if Ryan's going to be like the full-time starter over Fate at this point, but, after the first week, at least at that main take position, I would definitely give him the nod on the Reinhardt at this point.
Oh yeah, Karayan, he was nutty. Like Mayhem, definitely. This is gonna be Mayhem's best year in the Overwatch League, without a doubt. They lost to Philly, but I mean, Philly's good this year. I predicted they were gonna fall flat, and I'm probably wrong. There it is kind of curious to see Poco in for Fury, and I don't know if y'all noticed the walkouts, but EQO looked like he wanted to fight somebody. Like he was, and I was watching that. I was like, man, he looks mad. And I looked over in the
Maybe
Discord, and Ednar was like, man, why does EQO always look so mad? And I'm like,
maybe it was the case of
oh,
like with Architect subbing in. Maybe EQO just found out like right before he got on stage, hey, Ivy's getting the nod, and then he was
yeah.
just pissed off. I don't know.
So it's kind of like the reason that I thought Philly would fall flat is the competition between roles, and that could cause inner team turmoil. And while they put up and performed this weekend, so I'm kind of just need to say I was wrong about saying they were a weaker team, but I do see potential for them to come apart at the seams. But right now, they're looking to be a very elite team. Um, when we get into who they're going to play next week, that's going to really answer some of the questions about Philly. But for real, I have no clue why they would be playing Poco. Like you don't spend that kind of money. Like Fury was not cheap. You know that he could not have been a cheap player to pick up. So like I'm kind of really wanting to hear some of like the juice on what that decision was from. Like was there something juicy there, or was it just like, maybe he just was tired or something. I don't really know, but I really want to know what happened there. And seeing Ivy come in for EQO was not a standout May in stage 4 last season. So it's Ivy's May looked good. And you know who else had a really good May was hockey. Like, I'm kind of circling back here again, but Florida was impressive. Like, even though they lost, between Yaki just popping some May headshots, it's just like, how did that happen? Was that just luck? And then the Gingham Jins, he was on fire. So I think that Mayhem, this is not the Mayhem of years past. And like, they had a fighting chance against Philly. So they didn't look like they were gonna win, but it was a competitive game. So seeing Mayhem like that, it's good for the Mayhem fans. They've been through a lot the past 2 seasons, so it's gonna be a good year to be a Florida fan in comparison.
So for me, Mayhem looked way better than I thought they would. The one hole I see in that is Chris. This guy did not play a lick of Lucio. I think he played maybe 5 minutes. Why? Why are we playing Brigida the whole time? I don't understand. I think that's the main reason why they lost to Fusion. They had no other plan other than to play Chris on Brigida. You had Rain on your team. This was something that you guys had and you guys got rid of, and you brought in this guy Chris, and now you're not even going to play him on Lucio because I don't think he might not have a great Lucio. I don't know. That's my main problem with Mayhem is that they're going to look this one-dimensional on their support line. I don't know how far they're going to be able to take the rest of the team, which is it's a good team. It's a fine team. With that being said, I think the main reasons right now that Poco might be playing over Fury is take synergy that they've had over the past few years, and maybe communication. I mean, honestly, Fury's never been on a mixed roster, and they're probably coming in English, or a mix. Who knows? Actually, they might be Korean. Either way, with Funny Astro and Poco and all the other people, I feel like they might be having this mix, and I don't think Furies might not be ready to calm yet, and so they have Poco on the back lines, as well as maybe just Poco beat him out on the Orisa, and they wanted to run more Orisa. I know Fury has a good Orisa. I just think maybe Poco, with the communication and the synergy he's had before, maybe just beat him out in some trials that they had earlier. I don't think it's the end. I think that if one starts playing over the other, I think they're going to start getting some trade offers for one of them. But at the end of the day, I think it's fine. I think it made sense. They looked fine. I think they would have won either way with either. Not seeing Fury's not the end of the world. I think Fury might be fine with it. I'm sure they're working on whatever they need to get him starting. But for me, I think both Mayhem surprised me. I think they just need to work on. They might still have a few additions to go. They're almost to where they wanted to be with the additions they picked up last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I honestly think it was just they didn't want to cycle too many new pieces into the fold right out of the gates. So rather than, say, having 4 new roster members playing on stage for the first time to get there, it was only half the team. So that's why Poco was probably in over Fury. I don't buy into the whole flexibility facet of it. I don't think there's an argument that could even be made in that regard, knowing that both of them have basically played the same thing throughout their careers anyway. But, it could just be just a synergy thing so far, and that's something that will come in time regardless if you're Fury or, because, even Ivy, yes, I know Ivy didn't play Orisa. That's not what I was talking about. It was more setting up the ice walls and having coordination with the tank line in that case as well. So regardless of how the communication is, there's a lot more to kind of factor in when you add another piece on top of the layers that they already had set in place already. And you don't want to just add too many things all in at once because things can get pretty hectic on that end. Oh, looks like we lost Booger. Hopefully he'll be back on that end. But regardless, pretty happy with how the fusion looked overall. Welcome back, Booger.
My bad.
It's all good. We have the 2 cam scene anyway, so should anything happen on that end, we can just switch on the fly, which is what we did. And now you're back, and we're back to 3 cam anyway. So either way, I just want to see how Fury is going to compete on the team. I'm just happy with how the Fusion looked. Regardless, they still won out. Can't really make any complaints on that end, regardless of who was playing. But there's a lot of positives to be taken away from how Fusion performed in week number 2. Now, that being said, I do want to talk about Washington here really quick. There's been a lot of mixed reactions in regards to Stratus by community members. It seems like Stratus is one player that we just can't seem to agree on. There are a lot of people that are very high on his Mei, and there are a lot of people who have the thought process of, well, he makes a lot of risky calls and flags, and while that might be great on paper to, like, watch, might not be the most effective at the end of the day. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on that DPS duo of Corey and Stratus. And I know, like, they definitely hammed up to the crowd, like, living up to throwing the booze back at the Philadelphia arena throughout that. And that was definitely entertaining to watch. And it's going to be an interesting case to see how everyone's going to deal with that situation, because some players just might not be able to handle it as well as others. But, like, where do you guys sit on Stratus right now in regards to his performance as a Mei player?
Okay, so I think Stratus is he's really good at Mei, and I don't know, we haven't really seen a whole lot of his other heroes outside of the GOATS meta, so I'm looking forward to see what he's gonna do when hero bans come in and he gets in a spot where he's not playing Mei. I think that Stratus is definitely a very good DPS player, but Corey is definitely the star on that team.
Mhm.
So, Stratus can take those chances because Corey almost is just like on constant pop off mode. Like, he is really good. So I think that the DPS line, even though they are one of the more, I don't want to say shallow, but they're one of the DPS lines in the league that lacks depth. And even though that is the case, I think that that's their bright point. Like, Washington's DPS is their bright point. Like, their support is pretty good. I mean, their tanks, I was relatively impressed with Ellie Vote and Roar, and seeing Lolish come in, we'll see how that goes. But still, their DPS is the brightest point of that team. So I I really look forward to seeing them against what other teams come in this year. Um, they're gonna have their game against Paris this week is going to be very interesting to me, because Paris seems like they have potential to be a really good team. And, Washington, they beat Houston, which Houston looked really bad. And then they took the fight to Philly, which Philly looked elite. So, are we going to see Washington go into that spot where they're like a really good team, but kind of like that bottom of the good teams where they're like almost like a gatekeeper type of team? But no, I don't see any way that we don't see Washington make a massive improvement up on last year. Um, I don't know, Anura, what did you think about Washington?
I first of all, Stratus, I think he's a great Mei. I think mechanically alone, you can't deny that. I feel like there's some play decisions that he does do it's a little off, but sometimes they work out. He also has that pocket Doomfist that we probably need to talk about, where he'll bring it up whenever. And honestly, it's feast or famine for him. He'll get a few kills, or he'll do nothing with it and die. But that's what the pocket Doom does. Corey, this meta fell into Washington's hands. It's just like, oh, Corey, play hit scan. You can play Hanzo sometimes. Screw it, like whatever. Widow also great. McCree, you're fine. Stratus, yeah, just play Mei. You're pretty good at Mei. Literally, like everything. Ellie Vote, you can play some Diva. I've heard you've been pretty good at Diva before. This was really a really good meta for them, and I don't know. There was a lot of rumors of how they were doing in scrims and how it might not have been as well before, but that was a while ago. I think this really fell, and just really they look great. And I think also stage presence for them is huge. I feel like they perform 10 times better on stage than they probably would regularly, especially against an enemy team like that. For me, I feel like Washington's one of those teams that they lost all last year. They learned how to lose. They don't care anymore. They're gonna pop off or they're gonna do nothing. Like they're there. They're always gonna be dangerous because they don't. I don't think they really get affected by losses anymore. And I think winning just it's like a high for them. They're crazy. They're they're a crazy team. I like watching them. But for me, even if Stratus won't make up in those other projectile heroes or other heroes they need, they still have Tuba in the back line that should be good at some of those and should be practicing those right now while Stratus has May for the next few weeks. So hopefully the Tuba pickup's good enough for where even if you don't think Stratus is that good on other roles other than May, they have a backup that can really pull through for them.
Yeah, and they definitely have stuff to bring because they got a homestand event coming up this weekend. So I got some interesting matches this week. So looking at the Washington homestand event, one of several that they're gonna have this year. We have actually quite a few teams playing. So on Saturday, kicking things off at 12 p.m. Pacific time, we have the New York Excelsior going up against the Philadelphia Fusion. Following that at 2 p.m. Pacific, we got Boston Uprising versus Houston Outlaws in what will be passive aggressive fight. I don't know. That remains to be seen. And then at 4 p.m. Pacific time to close things out, you got the home team Washington Justice going up against the Paris Eternal with potentially the debut of Hanbin, who will be of age and eligible to play in this one. So I'm excited about that. Hopefully we get to see him. And then on Sunday at 12 p.m. Pacific time, we got New York Excelsior versus the Houston Outlaws, followed by Toronto Defiant and Philadelphia Fusion, with the final match being London Spitfire versus a home team, Washington Justice. So, on paper, some pretty damn close games. Potential debuts that we could see this week. Hopefully, some different strategies coming out in Houston's case. A lot of things to bring to the table here, but, is there any match in particular that you guys feel like solidifies itself as the match of the week compared to the field here?
I think New York versus Philly is going to tell us a lot. Those are both teams that a lot of people view as rather elite in the league this year. So we're really going to be able to have a high caliber battle there. Whereas I also am very interested to see Paris versus Washington. Both of these teams, uh, I might be wrong, but they're both 1-1, I believe.
Mhm.
And they both look like they had potential to be very good teams. And Washington lost against Philly because Philly was really good, and then Paris, their loss was against Toronto. And I think that we're gonna see, we have the potential to see Hanman come in, and we're gonna see if XCI is going to be consistently pop off, or if that first weekend he just had like a really good weekend. Like if he plays like he did in the opening weekend, then I think that they have a good chance to take down Washington. So this is like Paris throughout the season. They have players trickling in that are underage. So we're gonna see, it's gonna be a test for them to really incorporate them into their team as it comes. But I really think that those two games will most likely be the closest games in my opinion. My bad. I kind of picked two. I guess I should have stuck with one.
No, it's not good. Yeah, for me, I definitely say Eternal Justice. More so because the XZ Corey match really intrigues me on paper. XZ definitely, outside of Decay, was probably the person that has impressed me most this season. So I just want to see if XZ can actually go up against someone who is, I don't want to say by and large considered probably the best hit scan. Maybe Western in this case, but at least in this case, said Western player can actually back it up compared to other positions. But that's besides the point. So for me, it's definitely that particular match. But there's a lot to be said about New York Philly as well, just because those are two of the quote powerhouse teams in the league overall. But a lot of people are just gonna be like sleeping on that Boston Houston match too, just based off of how both teams have looked. But who knows? Like, for all we know, that match could end up being a banner and just go 5 maps, and then we might be looking at 2 completely new teams on both sides here.
Yeah, and they've got Blase going against his former Boston Uprising. That could make for interesting storyline.
Or they just don't play him and put
I
in
wouldn't
links
be
there.
mad at that. I would not be mad at that.
For me, I am looking at the Boston Houston Outlaws game. That's not my match of the week, but I'm excited for the first 2 games Saturday. And the third game's pretty cool. I'm actually really excited for the Toronto Defiant Philadelphia Fusion game. I'm very intrigued in how Toronto fits in the rankings, because they have a lot of people that I'm still very questionable about. Also, I mean, I just want to see how well they are. It's one of those things. I think this is their first top opponent. They played Paris Eternal. Paris looked all right, and then they looked pretty good at the next game. So it made Toronto look better than most people would think. If Paris just had a really good game against, it was London, right? Yeah, against London. Or if London's just bad, we just don't know it. There's a lot of just questions that Toronto Defiant's like one of those final pieces that I've really wanted to watch for a while to see how well they stack up to every other team, because they have a lot of season 1 players that just came together randomly, got meshed together. And with Beast, I want to see how well Beast does against Philadelphia Fusion, who could have picked him up because he was on the academy team. There's a lot of question marks for this team. And if, say, Philadelphia Fusion beats New York or loses badly to New York, I still want to see how well they're going to bounce back, or if Toronto can really still bring it to them after that. It's one of those games that after the first Saturday, it's going to look like a much more intriguing game to me than anything else.
Yeah, Toronto's one of those teams that seems like they might be good, but the sample size that we've seen them play is relatively small. So seeing them is really going to help us understand how good they really are this year.
I just want to know how many times Beast is going to spam how embarrassing to the other team. That's all I want to know at the end of the day. But if you're London, London's starting stretch is not great on paper. I'm not feeling too good about their chances against the Justice, especially knowing that, this is the Justice homestand and how well Justice have looked so far on that end. But I'm hoping Glister will put in a stronger performance, but I'm fairly worried that they're just going to get 3-0'd in this case. So hopefully Houston can help me out here, with Boston in that regard, but that remains to be seen. But definitely some intriguing matches. And, Saturday across the board is going to be a pretty action-filled day, because not only do we have Overwatch League, we also got a game night coming up also that night after the games as well, so stay tuned for that. But with that being said, I think it's time that we close things out for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, the best thing to do, as always, is to head over to iTunes and write us a review. Let us know how we're doing. We should have Sock Up, Sock Down coming back relatively soon. I do want to point out that, on Watchpoint, they did the stonks up or down or something. Not cool, guys, on that front. I see you. But we did get a new review this week that was on iTunes from Azeroth's Hero, who says, and I will preface this by saying that his review was too long and got cut off, so I cut off the last sentence that was cut off. because I didn't know what the rest of it said on that front. But Azeroth Zero says, in my mind, this podcast is great if you want to keep up with the OW scene without F5 in on Twitter or Reddit. Occasionally, the hosts across all of the OWL network make bold claims and statements about some things that you just have to ignore. Well, I mean, if you don't care about her opinion, that's fine. I can definitely understand that in, like, maybe Edinar's case, because, like, he tends to just be very argumentative and just being like, whoa, you're wrong. And he just leaves it at that without, like, further explaining things. But regardless, like, we do appreciate the reviews, and, definitely helps with traction on, the podcast, different podcatchers really across the board. So we do appreciate you on that front. Now, with that being said, if you want to find other content out there, we do have a way for you to do that via Overwatch Recall, which I still need to do for this week, which I'll do after this recording. So basically, we have a podcast directory covering all things Overwatch, Overwatch League, Path to Pro, Fantasy Overwatch League. If it's about Overwatch, chances are it's in our podcast directory because it is the most complete one out there as of basically every day. So every Sunday or occasionally on Monday, like tonight, you can find the Weekly Recall, which is our episodic listing of all the prior week's episodes. So stay up to date with that on Twitter at OW Recall. And as I mentioned, we have a game night this Saturday, February 22nd. Join us at 7 p.m. Pacific time after the Overwatch League games for a night of community games. And of course, we will be streaming that on Twitch. So to join, we'll be in Discord. You can throw your battle tags over in there, and we'll get you invited to the lobby. And of course, if you would like to support us, one other way is to pledge to our Patreon at patreon.com/OWL Network. LDO tiers started at just $1 a month. So you too can join the likes of our Master and Above patrons in Boomer Bob, Brendan, Jay-Z, Owl Kesha, and Agent Life in helping our network grow. So again, guys, thank you so much for all the help. Really does help cover podcast costs. Lips and hosting across the network can get pretty pricey, especially if we run multitudes of shows on that end. But Booger, why don't you go ahead and let our listeners know how they can go ahead and contact us?
Yeah, if you want to send an email to the show, you can send one to contact@owlnshow.com. We have a website that you can see at www.owlnshow.com. On Twitter, you can find the show at OWLN Show. And on YouTube, you can find all of the episodes of this podcast at youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. The Discord that you're going to want to join for game night, which is one of the most fun things to do in Overwatch, is discord.me/OWLN Show. Make sure you're there for the game night. It's a good time. On Twitch, there's twitch.tv/OWLN Show. And we are a Twitch affiliate, so you can help support the show by subscribing to the channel. You get network emoticons, and the podcast streams regularly, and you can see the different shows, as in Overwatch League Network, this show on Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific time. You got Overwatch League by the Numbers on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific time. There's Heroes Never Die, the variety Overwatch show that airs Wednesdays at 5 p.m. And there's host streams when available, and they run on a flex schedule. So you just make sure you follow it, and you'll get notified. The Patreon, if you want to help out a little extra, is patreon.com/OWL Network. And if you want to find me specifically, you can check out my Twitter at BoogerBrainz, BOOGERBRAINZZ. You can see all the other stuff we do. I try to run some fantasy contests that have little prizes through Twitter, but on the daily fantasy side, we've had a little hiccup with scoring, and as soon as we get the scores in, we'll send those out and have new ones coming. So where can the listeners find y'all specifically?
You can find me Anira at Twitter on Twitter at Anura ANURAOW. Yeah, that's where you can find me. And what about you, Totem?
Well, you can find me over on Twitter at Totally and I do stream Monday, Wednesday, Thursday on Twitch at twitch.tv/drunk. And on that note, I do want to mention I will be guesting on Around the Payload tomorrow night. That will be... I don't know what time that airs. Hold on. Let me check my Discord really quick. But that is, one of the High Noon Production podcasts. That will be at 4 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow, where I'll be going up against some rivals of mine in Thorn Rain from Blackwatch Report, which is a tier 2 podcast, and I play games from Omnic Lab, and yeah, you know, like that Meko versus his former team analogy I made earlier. Yeah, I'm coming for your throats. You guys better be ready. But yeah, we'll see you guys there tomorrow when I crush those fools, and whoever the fourth person is, I don't know. But I'm not worried. I got this in the bag. So with that said, guys, I'll see you tomorrow. If not then, hope to see you back on Wednesday for the next episode of Heroes Never Die. Take care and have a good night.